Hi, thank you for tuning into the Show Word Stacks. I'm Lisa Quintero, Young Adult Librarian.
And I'm Nick Barron, patron and sometimes volunteer.
This is the show where we talk to you about what we've been reading, watching, or listening to. And this week we're going to be talking about The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which is the prequel to the Hunger Games series. But first,
library news.
So there's quite a few things happening at the library. If any of you have been to visit recently, you might have noticed that we're asking people to be in the library for a maximum of 1 hour due to the rising cases of coronavirus in the North Shore. We've also removed a lot of our seating and are only allowing people to use the computers for an hour. So if you haven't been to the library yet, just be aware that that is a thing that is going on, and we are encouraging people to do curbside if they would like to get books. But you're still welcome to come in and browse, and you know that we're still available if you need reference help and all of that. We're just asking people to try to be a little bit more cautious. And then this week, we are actually going to be closed on Tuesday, November 10th, because we're having some HVAC work done. So some of you may have seen the signs up and around the library, and because we're having HVAC work done, that means that the vents and everything there won't be proper airflow, and so the health department recommended that we close the library for the day in order to prevent the spread of coronavirus. So we will be closed on Tuesday, but we'll be resuming our normal hours on Wednesday. In terms of programs, we've got a lot of things coming up this week. We've got Family Fun Night to Go kits on Monday, November 9th. And then we have on Tuesday, even though we're closed, there will be a Rhyme Time Tuesday with Miss Heidi online in the morning. And there will be a virtual program in the evening called Proven Ways to a Healthier Brain that is co-sponsored by the Senior Center and the library. And you can find information on that at the library website, showwordlibrary.org. And you can find the information on how to connect. And that, I believe, is a program on dementia. And then on Wednesday, we've got Art Cart online as normal. And then we have a few things coming up the following week, November 18th, Art Cart as well. And then on November 19th, there will be a Teen Take and Make Mod Podge Crafts. So if you know any teens who are looking for something fun to do, have them pick up one of our kits. You can pick them up either via curbside or you can pick them up in person. And that morning, there will also be the AM Book Club with Haley. And then finally, on the 20th, there will be some grown-up take-and-make kits. We've had a few different ones so far. Emily, our assistant director, did a salsa and pesto one back in September, and then our administrative assistant, Angie, did a Halloween one that was, some of you probably picked them up, the candy corn bunting and the spider hangings as well for Halloween. So yeah, keep an eye out for those. The adult one isn't listed what it is yet, but it says to be announced, so keep an eye out, and I don't know what exactly it'll be, but I'm sure it'll be something fun.
For the less crafty folks, Can you tell people what Mod Podge is?
Yeah, Mod Podge for the teen crafts is it's like a type of glue kind of. It basically you can attach things like images to a rock or like glass or paper, and so some of the crafts that like the teens will be able to do is there's like a magnet that you can they can take art and they can Mod Podge it on. You could take like, if you wanted to, like leaves from outside or things like that, and like glue them onto something, and it's a clear coat that attaches it without the filminess of like Elmer's glue.
Yeah, it's a paste that goes under and on top of whatever you're gluing down.
Yeah, so it's just to do the French art of decoupage, gluing things together and cutting them out. But yeah, so check those out. But I think that's all we've got coming up.
From the stacks.
So yeah, like I said, we're talking about Suzanne Collins's The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and both of us listened to it via Hoopla, the audio version, which was narrated by Santino. Do you remember his last name? I don't remember his last name either. Let me see if I can find it. But yeah, what did you think about it?
Well, first of all, you're finding the name.
Yeah, why don't you explain what the premise of the story is?
Okay. So the premise of the story is we are examining the backstory of President Snow before he became president. So it actually goes back to when he is in school.
Yeah, he's high school.
High school, or high school equivalent, and he is going through. Essentially, it is setting up his backstory with what life is like in the capital, in that era of Panem. It's after the first rebellion, the first uprising, and so he's got lingering feelings about the war and how they suffered in the capital in terms of rationing and how they lived their daily lives. And it goes through kind of him reflecting on how the House of Snow has fallen during the times after the rebellion, but also setting up for this his school project. And his school project was.
And his school project was that he was a mentor for one of the contestants in the Hunger Games. So the before we continue, the narrator is Santino Fontana.
Okay.
Not that people know a ton of narrators, but it's important because we'll be talking about the narration a bit.
Yes.
Versus having reading the book as opposed to the audio, listening to the audiobook. So he becomes a mentor to this girl, and her name is Lucy Gray, and she is a contestant from District 12, and he and a bunch of his classmates are supposed to, they're the first mentors for the Hunger Games because in this time they never had mentors for the contestants before, and the Capitol basically has been doing the Hunger Games for like 10 years, and this is the 10th year. And they want to make it more exciting because nobody's watching, nobody cares about it. And the whole reason that they did this was to remind people of, why it was important for them to keep doing what the Capitol asked, because if they didn't, this is what would happen to their children. And so it kind of gives you a overview of how the modern Hunger Games with Katniss came to be, because certain things that happened in the Katniss Hunger Games did not happen in the original Hunger Games.
Yeah,
the mentors weren't able to send gifts and stuff.
Yeah, so it takes you back to a time when the Hunger Games were much more primitive.
Mm-hmm.
The arena was always the same up to that point. There were no gifts. There was no, even though it was televised, they didn't glam it up.
Yeah, they didn't announce the deaths of the tributes, like they do in the modern Hunger Games, and they didn't have all the mutations either. That's something that comes about in this book, and they didn't have like all the prizes that the victors get. Like the victors didn't get a house, they didn't get fancy clothes. They when the victors arrive, or when the contestants arrive in the Capitol, they lock them up in the zoo and they don't feed them at all. And so it's like, you got these starving children who are fighting each other to the death. And they realize who wants to watch that? We need to take care of them when they get here and give them training and make it more exciting, and all these things.
Even in this, they didn't get any training.
Yeah,
that's something that must have evolved later on. But the idea is it was so brutal and primitive when it started that, in this particular, even the 10th Hunger Games, multiple of the contestants died before the Hunger Games even started.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that they came up with for the 10th Hunger Games was it was actually the students, the mentors, came up with the idea of gambling on the event and also of implementing drones to deliver rewards to the contestants.
Yeah, and having sponsorships so people watching at home could be like, oh, we like this contestant, so we're gonna send this contestant food or medicine or this or that, and using the postal service in order to make that happen. Yeah, and the book kind of goes into a little bit of fan service, I guess, in terms of where the origin of certain things came from. And I know I had certain feelings about it. I'm sure you had feelings about it as well. We find out the origins of the word Katniss, Katniss's name. We find out where the Hanging Tree song came from. We find out, a little bit about Tigress's history, because Tigress turns out to be Coriolanus Snow's cousin.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's also, they go deep into the origin of Mockingjays and Jabberjays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how they're different from each other, and how they're used and how the Jabberjays were used in the previous war. And yeah, so what were your feelings on the fan service?
Yeah, there were fan service. I think it's important to ground things with the fans and give them a little bit of that those Easter eggs, those things to keep people hooked. They're like, oh, that's where that came from. That's where that came from. But sometimes it goes too far. And I think this was one of those examples where there was a few things where it just went a little too far. For me, the origin of Katniss's name, it turns out that it's a type of swamp potato.
Yeah.
Like
I know, I was disappointed by that too.
Yeah, I thought that was like it just wasn't necessary. And the other thing is even though especially because the building on the origins of the Hunger Games itself and adding the bits and pieces, it was fan service in and of itself. I mean, it was you're building on the history of Panem. You're building on, I mean, the whole story revolves around snow, and then you're also you're adding all of these elements of the Hunger Games in that appear later, and it just seemed like, okay, throwing in this little detail just wasn't necessary. They're already doing everything for the fans.
Yeah, no, I felt that some of the details were unnecessary, but I did like some of the fan service. I really liked hearing the origin story of the Hanging Tree song, because I really liked that song, and it's kind of a haunting song that comes up in the Hunger Games with Katniss, and to hear Lucy Gray, who is Coriolanus Snow's contestant, she's the one who actually wrote the song, and we hear the history of the song and what exactly is meant from the lyrics of the song, and so I found that interesting, and as somebody who likes music and likes to hear the history of music and things like that, I found that interesting. One thing that I found a little frustrating though was we find out that all the Covey, because Lucy Gray is part of this group of people called the Covey, and they're a group of people in District 12 that are basically musicians, and they all have names that come from songs or poems. And so we hear these other poems and these other songs, and some of that stuff felt kind of superfluous to me. Also, a thought that I had while we were listening to the audiobook, because the audiobook is like 16 hours long, I was like, I wonder how much shorter this book would be if Coriolanus's name wasn't Coriolanus and they didn't have to say Coriolanus every time. And the second primary character's name is Sejanus, and so it's like Coriolanus, Sejanus, and like you just hear these names over and over again, and I was just like, how many minutes of my life would I have saved if these people had shorter names?
At least in conversation, it was often shortened to Corio.
Yeah, but Sejanus is always Sejanus. They didn't shorten that one at all. And Lucy Gray was never just Lucy. She was always Lucy Gray.
That's because she's Lucy Gray. And one of the things that so this book had a lot of songs and poems in it, and I know that we were kind of mutually agreed upon this. So the narrator, whose name was
Santino Fontana,
elected to speak all of the songs.
Like sung them. It was weird.
Yeah, and it's funny because the Hanging Tree song, they like kind of kept to sort of the melody of, but without being melodic at all, but kept sort of to the melody from the movie. And Old Clementine, which is just like an old-timey song, appears a bunch in the, and so that particular thing like holds the melody, roughly the melody of Old Clementine, but everything else is just spoken in this like weird monotone in the voice of the character. And I it's one of those things where as a voice actor, make an effort. I think that they could have done more with it, but they were just like, whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like Suzanne Collins did a really good job of making a story that was interesting, because early on in the book I wasn't exactly sure where it was going to go.
Yeah.
And it starts out with him in school and him, you know, being involved with the Hunger Games, and then the second part of the book is he becomes a peacekeeper. And so the second part follows his life as a peacekeeper. And so, you know, you got this look at this character that is not a likable person, and yet she managed to make this story that was interesting and engaging about this person who you hate. You know, it's like he thinks that he's a good person, but he's very manipulative. He's a total sociopath. And he does all these things, and he's always doing things because they benefit him. You know, he's not doing them because they help anybody else.
And one of the things that's interesting about it is Suzanne Collins did a very good job of him going through like the various results that could take place by choosing this action. And almost every single time he would like start to go towards the right thing to do, and then would think about what benefited him most and would
rationalize
at the last moment rationalize why he should do the other thing,
even though it meant, you know, somebody might die or somebody might get in trouble or
and the I when I was talking about this with Lisa earlier, I described how Suzanne Collins takes Coriolanus Snow and breaks him down. It's kind of like peeling away the layers of an onion.
Yeah.
As you peel it away, it just kind of like you find out more and you find out more, and you also his unlikability gets stronger and stronger and stronger as you get to the center. And so one of the things that was really important, and at first, I don't know if you agree with this, but early on, I had thought to myself, this book would be better if it was written from the perspective of Sejanus, because Sejanus is this very likable character who tries to do good. He's got a good heart, a little misguided at times, but has a good heart. And so like I thought to myself, why is this about Snow? He's so unlikable, but ultimately, as you start to peel back those layers, I am happy that it ended up being about Snow.
Yeah, no, I am too, because I feel like, you know, if it had been through Sejanus's perspective, we wouldn't have seen all of Snow's inner thoughts. And, you know, we just would have seen what Sejanus saw, and Sejanus saw Snow as his friend and somebody that he could trust and somebody that, you know, he considered a brother, you know, but inside Snow's head, we know that Snow would tell Sejanus that he was his brother and that he was his best friend and all this stuff, but in his head he was like, I don't like this guy, but this guy is the son of somebody powerful who can, you know, potentially get me into college, or who can help me, you know, get a better position in life, and someday I want to be president. And so you see his whole thought process as to why he's friends with somebody, and then like he falls in love with a girl, and you kind of see his whole thought process around that, because you're just like falls in love in quotes, yes, because you're like, at one point he's like, do I really love her, or do I just need to have her because, you know, he's just he has like he's a sociopath, he has like no emotions. But yeah, and it was interesting too, because we got a little bit of his history, you know, because part of the reason that he's very pro-capital, and his dad was a war hero, and his dad is dead, and his mom is dead, and he's being raised by his grandmother, and he lives with his grandmother and his cousin, and the war, you know, made it so that they couldn't live their wealthy life anymore, and they're rationing their food, and they're about to lose their apartment, and he's just miserable because he's like, you know, I just want to be wealthy and you know, a high society person again, and he does all he can to fake that he still is this person, and like works around things in order to try and get other people to give him things without him having to ask for them.
Yeah, he's very, very much about keeping up appearances, and he looks down on everybody else.
Yeah.
One of the things, like, you know, there's a scene early on in the book where he talks about one of his neighbors like carting away a dead body in the street in order to cannibalize the dead body for its meat. And, you know, obviously, you know, yeah, you could see looking down on that, but you you everything when he thinks about the people from the districts and how all people from the capital are portrayed as thinking about the people from the districts. It's the class dynamic in the book is very strong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the class dynamic's very strong. One thing that I didn't like about the book at the beginning, but that I ended up liking later on was, in the original Hunger Games, the trilogy covers, all the contestants, and so we get all this backstory and all these different contestants. And at the beginning, when they're telling the story of the 10th Hunger Games, it was kind of confusing because there's all these names being thrown out, but you don't really have a lot of backstory on these people, and so you're not really emotionally attached to any of those characters. But I think ultimately ended up working out because like it also shows him like he was never he never saw those people as people. He just saw them as fodder to keep the capital in power and to that they were worthless to him. Like to him, the way he talks about people from the districts versus people from the capital, like people from the capital are humans to him, and people from the district are like the lowest of the low, and they're not even human.
With the exception of Lucy Gray.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of the things that is also interesting is that it's almost like the way they portrayed all of the mentors as it's almost like their contestants were pawns, and they were just the people that were pushing the pawns around the board. Very much like they didn't care very much whether they lived or died. They wanted their person to win the game
so they could get a good grade.
So they could get a good grade.
Yeah, because ultimately the person who won the Hunger Games is supposed to win a scholarship, and Coriolanus wants to win because his family's poor, but nobody knows that his family's poor. But he's poor and he wants to win this scholarship so he could go to university, and so he works with Lucy Gray, who's his contestant, to try to win. And then he does a bunch of things that are against the rules in order to try and win. But he doesn't see anything wrong with doing anything against the rules because it's all just about, him and him doing what he needs. Like he sees it as him just doing what he needs to do to survive and to like protect his grandmother and his cousin.
Yeah, and there's one line that gets repeated. It's a refrain throughout the entire book that starts from, you actually first hear it from Tigris's mouth, and that's "Snow lands on top." And in that class dynamic that goes throughout the book, it's like, despite all of the things that he does wrong, his privilege always ends up with him coming out on top.
Yeah.
And so, it's not that the book does a really good job of building up tension, where you think, especially because the character is very paranoid, and so you go through his full mental process every time he's trying to make a decision, and so you feel his paranoia, and so it helps to ramp up that tension.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, like you said, that he was a very privileged person because he has all these connections, and all these connections end up getting him further and further along in where he wants to be. And, at times he dislikes some of these people, or he, doesn't want to do certain things, but he does them because he knows that it will further him in his ultimate goals. Overall, I enjoyed it. It's a very different feel from the original trilogy. And I feel like it's the kind of book that you could read if you've never read the trilogy before. You could start with it. It's actually listed as book 0. You could start with this book and then move on to the rest of the trilogy, or if you've already read the rest of the trilogy
or seen the movies,
then you can come back and learn about Snow. It was interesting because in the movies, in the books, the series, you hear a lot about his fascination with roses and how much he loves his rose gardens, and he has these poisonous roses, and we get a little bit of the history of that in this book because his grandmother grew roses on the roof of their apartment, and then also his mom, who had died, one of the few things that he had of hers was a compact that had like rose scented powder, and that was like his one memory of his mom, and so he always liked the smell of roses. And when he goes off to some event at school, like his grandma cuts a rose and puts it in his lapel, and so that's kind of how that part comes into his life. Yeah, and there's a lot of names that are familiar in this book too, because you've got Lucky Flickerman, who I'm guessing is supposed to be somehow related to Caesar Flickerman, because Lucky Flickerman is the guy who announces the Hunger Games stuff, and then later on in the trilogy, it's Caesar Flickerman, which makes sense because it probably would be Lucky Flickerman's son or something, because it's 30 years later or whatever. So
yeah, the Heavensby name is thrown around a bit.
Yeah, so there's a few names that came up. Yeah. So yeah, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's definitely if you are a fan of the series, it's definitely worth reading or listening to, like we did. The original trilogy could very well exist without it, and you wouldn't feel the need to ever know the backstory. But if you're the type of person that wants to know more about Panem, you want to know more about what the society was like that created the Hunger Games. It does give you a bit of insight into that, and so that's cool. I as somebody that likes world building, I liked the world building aspects of, especially because it gives you insight into, since Coriolanus Snow is a peacekeeper, you get to see things kind of from the side of the peacekeepers a little bit, and gave you a little bit more insight, which is cool.
It was. Yeah, all the different characters allowed you to see things, because Sejanus is a district boy who his dad gets promoted and ends up moving to the capital, but he's never really truly accepted as capital because he is a district kid, and so that also gives you a different perspective as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, check it out if you like. Like I said, it's on Hoopla, and we also have a copy of the physical book at the library if you would rather read it. I kind of wish that I had, after listening to Santino Fontana try to sing in quotation marks the songs, but and also I think I might have read it faster if I didn't have to hear the names Coriolanus and Sejanus so many times. But
Panem, our sacred land. His grandmam every morning gets up and sings the national anthem, and it is literally read like that. Panem, my sacred land. Well, I don't even know if I have the words right other than Panem, but it's the delivery that matters.
Yeah. Well, as always, thank you for tuning into the Shorewood Stacks. We hope you have enjoyed our show. You can find us on Podbean, Spotify, or iTunes. If you have any questions for the hosts, please email us at shorewoodstacks@gmail.com. We hope you have a great week. Thanks for listening, and be well. The Shorewood Stacks is produced and recorded by Lisa Quintero and Nick Barron for the Shorewood Public Library. Music for the show is by Kevin MacLeod. The song is called Ice Flow and can be found at incompetech.com.